The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Aurelio's, each droplet a tiny fist demanding entry into the warmth I could never truly claim as my own. I moved through the dining room like a ghost, quiet, unnoticed, essential only in my absence. The white marble floors reflected the golden chandeliers above, creating an illusion that I walked on light itself, though my feet knew only the ache of 12-hour shifts and worn shoes held together by hope and superglue. "Table 7 needs water," Marcus hissed as he swept past me, his pressed uniform a sharp contrast to mine. The same style, but somehow on me it looked borrowed, temporary, like everything else in my life. I nodded, already moving. That was my existence, always moving, always one step behind the rhythm of a world that belonged to people who never noticed me. The crystal pitcher felt heavy in my hands, cold condensation slipping between my fingers as I approached table 7. That's when I saw them. The booth in the far corner, the one reserved for people whose names appeared in newspapers, never for good reasons, but always with respect threaded through fear. 3 men in suits that cost more than my yearly rent sat in shadow and cigarette smoke, though smoking had been banned in the restaurant for years. No one would tell them to stop. No one would dare. But it wasn't the men that made my breath catch. It was the child. A boy, no more than 5, sat at the edge of the booth, his small legs swinging with the oblivious joy of someone who didn't yet understand the weight of the world his father commanded. Dark curls framed a cherubic face, and in his hands, he clutched a toy car, making soft, vrooming sounds that somehow cut through the classical music and murmured conversations. I should have looked away, should have focused on my task, on survival, on invisibility. But something in that child's innocence made my chest tighten with a longing so fierce it bordered on pain. I'd wanted that once. A child, a family, a life that meant something beyond counting tips and wondering if I'd make rent. But Michael had taken that dream when he left, his apologies as worthless as the engagement ring he'd pawned to pay his debts. "Miss?" Table 7, a middle-aged couple celebrating an anniversary, gestured impatiently at their empty glasses. I blinked, forcing a smile that never reached my eyes, and poured their water with hands that had learned steadiness through repetition rather than calm. The husband didn't look at me. The wife nodded absently. I was furniture to them, functional and forgettable. As I turned to leave, I heard it. A crack. Sharp, distinct. Then the scream of a woman from the booth behind me. Not the corner booth with the men who smelled of danger and expensive cologne, but the one adjacent, where a waitress named Sophie balanced a tray loaded with champagne flutes. Time became syrup, thick and slow. Sophie's heel caught on the carpet's edge, a small traitorous fold that housekeeping had missed. The tray tilted. Crystal glasses began their inevitable descent, catching the chandelier light as they fell, transforming into deadly, beautiful projectiles aimed directly at the corner booth, directly at the child. The boy looked up, his dark eyes wide, toy car frozen mid-vroom. He didn't understand, didn't know to move. The men beside him were already in motion, but they were too far, too slow, reaching for a child who sat in the direct path of raining glass and sharp edges. I didn't think. Thinking was a luxury for people who had something to lose. My body moved on instinct, the same instinct that had carried me through evictions and heartbreak, and nights when giving up seemed easier than breathing. The pitcher dropped from my hands, water exploding across marble as I lunged forward. 3 steps. That's all it took to cross the distance between invisible and unforgettable. I threw myself over the child, my body a shield of flesh and bone against the glittering cascade. His small form disappeared beneath me as I curled around him, my back to the storm. The first glass shattered against my shoulder blade, a white-hot burst of pain that stole my breath. Then another, and another. A percussion of breaking crystal and tearing fabric. I felt the champagne soak through my uniform, mixing with something warmer. Blood. Probably mine. Definitely mine. The boy beneath me was screaming now, but it was muffled against my chest, and I held him tighter, absorbing each impact, each sharp kiss of broken glass embedding itself in my back like a constellation of agony. Then silence. Not true silence. The restaurant erupted in gasps and shouts, chairs scraping, feet pounding, but the rain of glass had ended. I remained frozen, hunched over the child, my body trembling with adrenaline and shock. "Don't move." The voice came from above me, low and dark as midnight, with an accent that softened consonants and sharpened vowels into something almost lyrical. Italian, my scrambled brain supplied uselessly. "Matteo, are you hurt?" The child, Matteo, whimpered against me but managed a small, "No, Papa, Papa." Oh God, what had I done? What had I thrown myself into? Hands gripped my shoulders, firm but careful, avoiding the worst of the damage. "Look at me," the voice commanded. And despite every survival instinct screaming to run, to hide, to disappear, I lifted my head. The man kneeling beside me stole whatever breath the glass had left me. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things often are, sharp jaw shadowed with stubble, dark eyes that held depths I couldn't fathom, and a scar that traced from his left eyebrow into his hairline, a silver thread against olive skin. His suit was immaculate despite the chaos, midnight blue fabric that probably cost more than my car, if I still had a car, but it was his eyes that trapped me. They should have been cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who commanded fear with the same ease others commanded coffee orders. Instead, they burned with something I couldn't name, an intensity that made me feel seen for the first time in years. Dangerously seen. "You're hurt," he said. And it wasn't a question. His gaze traveled over my face, down to where glass protruded from my shoulder like grotesque jewelry, and something shifted in his expression. A flash of rage so profound it made the air crackle. "I'm fine," I whispered, though we both knew it was a lie. Is Matteo?" "You knew his name." Those dark eyes sharpened, focused on me with an attention that felt like being dissected. "How did you know his name?" I just heard." My words stumbled over themselves, clumsy and inadequate. Everything hurt. Everything was wrong. I'd broken the first rule of survival. Never be noticed. "Papa, she saved me." Matteo had wriggled out from beneath me, his small hands reaching for my face with a tenderness that made my eyes burn. The glass was going to hit me, but she jumped. The man, Papa, remained utterly still, his hand still on my shoulder, and I could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from asphalt. Around us, the restaurant held its breath. Sophie was crying somewhere, apologizing to anyone who would listen. Marcus had appeared with the first aid kit, but he stood frozen 3 feet away, unwilling to approach the corner booth without permission. Permission from the man whose son I'd saved. Whose son I'd touched without asking. "What's your name?" he asked, and there was something in his tone that made it clear this wasn't a request I could refuse. "Elena," I managed. "Elena Santos." "Elena." He repeated it slowly, tasting each syllable, and somehow my name became something else entirely in his mouth, something precious and dangerous and wholly owned. "I am Dante Moretti." The name landed like a stone in water, ripples spreading outward. I watched understanding dawn on the faces around us, the waitstaff who'd worked here longer than me, the manager who suddenly appeared looking pale and terrified, the few diners who recognized what that name meant. Moretti. The family that owned half the city's underbelly and enough legitimate businesses to pretend at respectability. The name whispered in cautionary tales and newspaper articles that never quite printed the full truth. I'd thrown myself over the son of the most dangerous man in the city. I should clean up. I tried to stand, to escape, but Dante's hand tightened on my shoulder. Gentle, but immovable. "You need a hospital," he said. "Marco." He didn't raise his voice, but one of the men from the booth materialized instantly, phone already in hand. "Call Dr. Russo. Tell him to meet us at the estate. And find out who's responsible for this." He gestured at the broken glass, at Sophie still sobbing. "Accident." The way he said accident made it clear he suspected otherwise. "Sir, really, I can just go to the ER. I have insurance." Well, sort of. The lie died on my lips as Dante finally released my shoulder to stand, towering over me with a presence that made the high ceilings feel low. "You saved my son," he said quietly, and everyone leaned in to hear, though none would admit it later. You threw yourself into harm's way for a child you don't know. Whatever you had before this moment, your plans, your debts, your life, it's changed now, Elena Santos. I pay my debts, and this debt—" His eyes held mine, dark and inescapable. "I will spend as long as necessary to repay." It should have sounded like gratitude. Instead, it sounded like a threat, or a promise, or something far more dangerous than both. Behind him, Matteo clutched his toy car and smiled at me with gap-toothed innocence, unaware that his father's words had just wrapped around me like chains disguised as silk. The glass in my back throbbed in rhythm with my pulse, each heartbeat a reminder that I'd been noticed, marked, claimed by someone whose interest could be more fatal than indifference ever was. Dante extended his hand to help me up, and I stared at it. Elegant fingers, a platinum watch that caught the light, a single ring bearing a crest I didn't recognize, and knew that taking it would mean crossing a threshold I could never uncross. But what choice did I have? I'd already thrown myself into his world. Now his world would throw itself around me, glass and all. I placed my trembling hand in his, and his fingers closed around mine with the finality of a door locking, or a cage closing. The leather seats of Dante's car smelled like money and danger, rich, supple, with undertones of cologne that probably cost more than my monthly salary, had cost more. Past tense. Because I was fairly certain I no longer had a job at Aurelio's, not after bleeding across their pristine marble and disrupting their most important table. I sat rigid in the back seat, acutely aware of Matteo pressed against my uninjured side, his small hand clutching the fabric of my ruined uniform. Dante sat across from us in the spacious interior, his body angled toward me with a focus that made my skin prickle. The man he'd called Marco drove, silent and efficient, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror with an expression I couldn't read. Another man, broader, scarred, named Luca, sat in the passenger seat, speaking quietly into a phone in rapid Italian. I caught only fragments. L'incidente, la ragazza, il bambino, the accident, the girl, the boy. "Does it hurt?" Matteo asked, his voice small in the heavy silence. "A little," I admitted, though "a little" was a generous lie. My back felt like it had been shredded by claws, each movement sending fresh waves of fire through my nervous system. But something about this child's concern made me want to be brave, to show him that protection didn't always come with a price tag he'd have to pay later, though I was beginning to suspect I'd be paying mine for a very long time. "You're very brave," Matteo continued, his dark eyes, so like his father's, studying my face with disconcerting intensity. "Like the heroes in my books. Are you a hero?" "No, sweetheart. I'm just a waitress who has excellent instincts." Dante's voice cut through my self-deprecation like a blade through silk. And poor self-preservation. His eyes hadn't left me since we'd entered the car, and the weight of his attention made me feel simultaneously naked and suffocated. Most people would have looked away, told themselves it wasn't their problem. Why didn't you? The question hung in the air, deceptively simple. I could feel the trap in it, the way my answer might reveal more than I intended, but exhaustion and pain had stripped away my usual filters, leaving only raw truth. "He's a child," I said quietly. "That's reason enough." Something flickered in Dante's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "You have children of your own?" "No." The word came out harder than I intended, carrying years of disappointment and a future that had died with Michael's departure. "No children. No family. Just me." "Just you," Dante repeated, and the way he said it made it sound less like loneliness and more like possibility. "No one will be worried about your absence tonight?" The implications of that question made my stomach twist. I should call my landlord, let him know I'll be late with rent again. "Your rent is paid." Dante pulled out his phone, typed something with swift efficiency. "For the next year. Consider it the first installment on my debt." My mouth went dry. "You can't. That's not. I don't even know how much." "Irrelevant." He pocketed the phone, his gaze never wavering. "You took glass meant for my son. There is no sum that adequately compensates that action, but I will try nonetheless. Your rent is handled." Your medical bills will never reach you. Your manager at Aurelio's has been informed you're taking an indefinite leave of absence with full pay. I'm being fired, I translated bitterly. You're being protected, Dante corrected, and there was steel beneath the smoothness now. The incident tonight was no accident, Elena. Someone wanted to hurt my son. You put yourself between him and that harm. Which means... He leaned forward slightly, and the car suddenly felt much smaller. Whoever arranged this will now see you as either an accomplice or a witness. Both positions are dangerous. Fear, cold and sharp, cut through the pain. What are you saying? I'm saying that your invisibility, that thing you've worn like armor for so long, is gone now. Everyone in that restaurant saw you save Matteo. By morning, everyone who matters will know your name, your face, your connection to my family. His jaw tightened. I cannot give you back your anonymity, but I can give you my protection. The question is whether you're smart enough to accept it. The car glided through gates that opened automatically, revealing a driveway lined with manicured hedges and security cameras disguised as garden lights. The estate beyond looked like something from a magazine I couldn't afford. Modern architecture softened by classical Italian elements, all stone and glass, and old-world elegance transplanted into new-world excess. This was a fortress dressed as a home, and I was being invited inside. I don't understand what's happening, I whispered, more to myself than to Dante. This morning I woke up in my studio apartment, worried about tips and rent and whether I could afford to fix my refrigerator. Now I'm in a car with... I stopped, suddenly aware of Matteo listening, of speaking truths a child shouldn't hear. With someone who owes you everything, Dante finished quietly, and who pays his debts, Elena. Always, the car stopped in front of the main entrance, where a man in a white coat waited with a medical bag. Dr. Russo, presumably. Marco opened my door, offering a hand I was too disoriented to refuse. The moment I stood, my legs threatened to buckle, adrenaline finally deserting me and leaving only pain and shock in its wake. Dante was there instantly, his arm around my waist, supporting me with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything I'd heard about the Moretti family. He smelled like expensive fabric and something darker, gunpowder, maybe, or just the metallic tang of danger that clung to men who lived in shadows. I can walk, I protested weakly. Humor me. His breath stirred my hair, and I hated how my body responded to his proximity, how, even through pain, I could feel the solid warmth of him, the barely leashed power in the muscles beneath his suit. Inside, the house was as immaculate as I'd feared, all marble and dark wood, with artwork on the walls that probably cost more than most people's houses. A woman in her 60s appeared, severe in black dress and pearls, her eyes widening when she saw the state of me. Dio mio, she breathed. Dante, what? Matteo is fine, Agnese. This is Elena. She saved him. Dante guided me toward a hallway, the doctor following close behind. Prepare the blue guest room. She'll be staying with us for the foreseeable future. What? No, I can't. Panic finally broke through the shock. I have to work. I have what you have, Dante said, steering me into a room that looked like a luxury hotel suite. Is multiple lacerations, possible glass embedded in your back, and shock that's going to hit you like a freight train in about 10 minutes. What you need is medical care and rest. Argue with me tomorrow when you're not bleeding. He lowered me onto the edge of a massive bed with sheets that probably had a higher thread count than my entire wardrobe, then stepped back to let Dr. Russo approach. But he didn't leave. Instead, he moved to lean against the wall, arms crossed, watching with that same unnerving intensity. I'll need to remove her shirt, Dr. Russo said gently, and I felt my face flush hot despite everything. I'll turn around, Dante said. But he didn't offer to leave, and somehow I knew arguing would be pointless. The doctor helped me ease the ruined uniform off, careful around the glass still embedded in my skin. I heard his sharp intake of breath, felt his professional fingers probing gently, and tried not to whimper at each touch. 15 lacerations, Dr. Russo reported, presumably to Dante. 3 pieces of glass still lodged in the tissue. She's lucky. None hit anything vital, but she'll have scars. Make them as minimal as possible. Dante's voice was flat, controlled, but I heard something beneath it. Rage, barely contained. Whatever you need, whatever specialists. I'll do my best, the doctor assured him. This will hurt, he warned me. I need to extract the glass before I can stitch. I nodded, gripping the edge of the bed, and tried to prepare myself for pain I knew would be unbearable. Instead, I felt warm fingers wrap around mine. Dante had moved without sound, now kneeling beside the bed, his hand engulfing mine with surprising gentleness. Look at me, he commanded softly, not at what he's doing. At me. I met his eyes, those dark, fathomless eyes that held secrets and sins I couldn't imagine, and tried to find something to anchor myself to as the doctor began his work. Tell me about yourself, Elena Santos, Dante said, his thumb stroking small circles on the back of my hand, a distraction I desperately needed. Where are you from? Here, I gasped, as the first piece of glass came free, fire blooming across my shoulder blade. Born in the city, East Side. My parents... I broke off, breathing hard. Your parents? He prompted, his grip tightening. Dead. Car accident when I was 19. I've been on my own since then. The words came easier than I expected, pulled out by pain and those circling fingers that somehow made confession feel safe. Worked my way through community college. Dropped out when the money ran out. Been waitressing ever since. And before tonight, what did you want? His question was strange, intimate, asked as if my answer mattered to him. I bit my lip as another shard emerged, tears I refused to shed burning behind my eyes. I wanted to be someone who mattered, someone people remembered. Stupid, right? The girl who wanted to be invisible wanted to be seen. Not stupid, Dante said quietly. Universal. We all want to matter, Elena. We just go about it differently. I built an empire. You saved a child. Which do you think history will judge more kindly? The question was so unexpected, so genuine, that I almost laughed. You're asking me to judge you? I'm asking you to see me, he corrected. Really see me. Not the name or the reputation. Because I see you, Elena, and I think I'm only beginning to understand what I've found. His words should have terrified me. Instead, they settled over my skin like a brand, marking me as surely as the scars, doctor. Russo was now stitching closed. All done, the doctor announced, applying bandages with practiced efficiency. Keep them clean and dry. Come back in a week for a follow-up, and... He hesitated, glancing at Dante. Try not to move too much for the next few days. The stitches need time to set. She won't be going anywhere, Dante assured him, rising to his feet with fluid grace. Thank you, Antonio. Marco will show you out. The doctor packed his supplies and left, leaving me alone with Dante in a room that suddenly felt too small and too large all at once. I sat on the edge of the bed in just my bra and uniform pants, bandages covering my back, feeling more exposed than I'd ever been in my life. Dante crossed to a dresser, pulled out what looked like an expensive silk shirt. Arms up, he instructed. I can dress myself. Indulge me. He knelt before me again, helping guide my arms into the sleeves with a care that stole my breath. His fingers worked the buttons slowly, his knuckles occasionally brushing against my collarbone, and each touch felt deliberate, claiming. Why are you doing this? I whispered. Why do you care so much? His hand stilled on the final button, and he looked up at me, so close I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the warmth of his breath against my throat. Because you jumped, he said simply, without hesitation, without knowing who we were, without calculating the cost. You just jumped. Do you know how rare that is, Elena? True selflessness? I've spent my life surrounded by people who calculate every move, every word, every breath. And then you, a woman I'd never met, threw herself onto broken glass for my son. How could I not care about someone capable of that? His words wrapped around me like the silk shirt, soft and inescapable. I don't belong in this world, I said, needing him to understand. I don't know the rules, the expectations. I'll disappoint you. You already exceeded every expectation by breathing. Dante's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Sleep now. Tomorrow we'll discuss your new reality. But tonight, you're safe. I promise you that. Safe. The word should have comforted me. Instead, as I watched him leave, closing the door softly behind him, I wondered if safety in Dante Moretti's world was just another word for captivity, and why the thought didn't terrify me as much as it should. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the distinct sensation that my entire back had been set on fire. Every breath sent fresh needles of pain through the stitches. Every small movement a reminder that yesterday had been real, the glass, the blood. The dark-eyed man who'd carried me into his fortress and claimed my debt as his own. The clock on the nightstand read 10:47 a.m. I'd slept 13 hours. Panic hit immediately. My shift at Aurelio's had started at 6. Marcus would be furious. Tips would be divided without me. I'd lose my... Then I remembered. No more Aurelio's. No more invisibility. No more normal. A soft knock interrupted my spiral. Miss Santos? A woman's voice, accented and cautious. May I come in? Yes, I managed, pulling the silk sheets up to my chin despite being fully clothed in Dante's shirt. The door opened to reveal the woman from last night. Agnese, Dante had called her. She carried a tray laden with coffee, fruit, and pastries that smelled like heaven. Her severe expression from yesterday had softened slightly, though wariness still lingered in her eyes. Mr. Moretti asked me to bring you breakfast, she said, setting the tray on the bedside table with practiced efficiency. And to inform you that Dr. Russo will be here this afternoon to check your bandages. She hesitated, then added, He also asked me to show you the wardrobe he had delivered this morning. Wardrobe? I echoed stupidly. Agnese moved to the closet and opened it, revealing what must have been thousands of dollars worth of clothing. Jeans, dresses, casual wear, all in what appeared to be my exact size. Shoes lined the bottom shelf. From sneakers to heels I'd never have the courage to wear. When did he... I couldn't finish the question, too overwhelmed by the implications. Mr. Moretti is very efficient when properly motivated, Agnese said dryly. He had his people working through the night. Everything should fit, but if adjustments are needed, the tailor can return. She moved toward the door, then paused. He's asked to see you when you're ready. No rush, he said, though. She almost smiled. He's been checking on you every hour since dawn. Matteo, too. The boy is quite taken with you. After she left, I sat in the massive bed, staring at the closet full of clothes I hadn't asked for, eating pastries I hadn't earned, in a house where I didn't belong. Everything in me screamed to run, to grab my ruined uniform and walk out the gates, consequences be damned. But Dante's words from last night echoed in my mind. Someone wanted to hurt my son. You put yourself between him and that harm. If he was right, if last night hadn't been an accident, then leaving might be the most dangerous thing I could do. I'd been seen, marked, connected to the Morettis whether I wanted to be or not. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt almost like relief to matter, even if mattering meant danger, to be seen, even if being seen meant captivity. God, what was wrong with me? I showered carefully, keeping the bandages dry as instructed, then dressed in jeans and a soft sweater that fit perfectly, because of course they did. Dante Moretti didn't do anything by halves, including dressing the woman who'd saved his son. Agnese found me wandering the hallway looking lost. He's in his study, she said, gesturing toward a set of double doors at the end of the corridor. Third door on the left, just knock. The study smelled like leather and expensive cigars, all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes in multiple languages. Dante sat behind a massive desk, papers spread before him, phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking rapid Italian, his tone clipped and dangerous. But the moment he saw me in the doorway, his entire demeanor shifted. He ended the call mid-sentence. Elena. He stood, circling the desk with that predatory grace that made my pulse quicken. How are you feeling? Like I was used as a pincushion, I admitted, but alive. Thanks to your doctor. Thanks to your own resilience. He studied me with unnerving intensity, taking in the clothes, the way I held myself slightly hunched to protect my back. They fit well. You shouldn't have, I started, but he raised a hand. We've already established I pay my debts. Clothes are a minor installment. He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. Sit. Please, we need to talk about what happens now. I lowered myself carefully into the chair, acutely aware of his gaze tracking every wince, every sharp breath. You said last night wasn't an accident. It wasn't. Dante returned to his seat, but instead of the papers, his focus remained entirely on me. The woman who dropped the glasses, Sophie was it, has worked at Aurelio's for 3 years without incident. Last night, she received a phone call 30 minutes before her shift. Afterward, she seemed distracted, nervous. Then the accident happened at precisely the moment when my attention was divided. His jaw tightened. Someone paid her to create a distraction. The glasses were meant to cause chaos, to make my men react, to draw them away from Matteo. What they didn't anticipate was you. My mouth went dry. Who would want to hurt a child? Many people want to hurt me, Elena. Matteo is simply the most effective way to do so. He leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, I saw weariness in his eyes. I've made enemies in my line of work. Rivals who think killing my son would weaken my position, send a message, start a war. They're not wrong. If anything had happened to Matteo, he trailed off. But the darkness in his expression completed the sentence with violence I didn't want to imagine. And Sophie? I asked quietly. Has been questioned. She claims a man threatened her daughter if she didn't cooperate. We're tracking him now. Dante's tone suggested that man's future would be brief and unpleasant. But that's not your concern. Your concern is understanding that by inserting yourself into this situation, you've become part of it. The people who orchestrated last night know you interfered. They know your face, your name, and they'll want to understand why a waitress would risk her life for my son. Because it was the right thing to do, I said, frustration bleeding into my voice. Not everything is a calculation, a strategy, I know. His interruption was soft, almost gentle. That's what makes you dangerous, Elena. Your goodness in a world built on calculated cruelty. It makes you unpredictable. It makes you... He paused, searching for words. Valuable. The way he said valuable made me feel like a commodity being appraised, and I hated it. So what am I? A prisoner? A witness you need to protect? What exactly is my role in your world, Mr. Moretti? Dante, he corrected. And you're whatever you want to be. But you'll be it here, under my protection, until the threat is neutralized. How long will that take? His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. As long as necessary. A knock interrupted whatever response I might have made. Marco entered without waiting for permission, his expression grim. Boss, we've got a situation. The Calabrese family is requesting a meeting. They say it's about last night. Dante's entire body went rigid, and I watched the transformation happen in real time. The almost gentle man who'd buttoned my shirt became someone else entirely, someone cold, lethal, carved from marble and malice. When? His voice could have frozen flame. Tonight. Neutral ground. They're claiming innocence, want to negotiate peace before this escalates. Convenient. Dante stood, buttoning his suit jacket with sharp, precise movements. Tell them I'll meet them at the warehouse at 8. Prepare the usual precautions. His gaze flicked to me. And arrange additional security for the house. No one gets within 100 yards of Elena or Matteo without clearance. Boss. Marco hesitated, glancing at me. Should we move her to a secure location? If the Calabrese family knows about her, they don't, Dante said flatly. Not yet, and I intend to keep it that way. She stays here where I can guarantee her safety. After Marco left, silence stretched between us, thick with things unsaid. Finally, I found my voice. You're going to meet with the people who might have tried to kill your son. I'm going to meet with people who want me to believe they had nothing to do with it, Dante corrected. Whether they're telling the truth or setting another trap remains to be seen. He moved around the desk toward me, and I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. You'll stay inside today. Matteo has been asking about you constantly. Perhaps you could keep him company? Agnese can show you to the playroom. It wasn't really a question, but I nodded anyway. And tonight, while you're at this meeting, tonight, you'll stay locked in this house with enough security to protect a head of state, and you'll trust that I know what I'm doing. He reached out, his fingers ghosting along my jaw with unbearable tenderness. "I won't let anything happen to you, Elena. You saved my son. That makes you mine to protect. Mine." The words settled between us like a promise and a threat, and I found I couldn't look away from him, couldn't break whatever spell his proximity cast. "I'm not yours," I whispered, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. "Not yet," Dante agreed, his thumb tracing my lower lip with devastating slowness. "But you will be, Elena Santos. Whether you realize it yet or not, the moment you threw yourself over Mateo, you became mine. The only question is how long it takes you to stop fighting it." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in his study with the scent of his cologne and words that felt like chains wrapping around my ribcage, restricting my breath and my freedom in equal measure. Mateo found me an hour later in the massive playroom that looked like a toy store had exploded. He launched himself at me with the enthusiasm only a 5-year-old could muster, and I caught him carefully, mindful of my back. "You're here!" he exclaimed, his small hands framing my face. "Papa said you'd stay with us. Are you staying forever? Can you read to me? Do you like dragons? I have 17 dragon toys. Wanna see?" His innocent joy was a balm against the darkness of Dante's world, and I found myself smiling genuinely for the first time since waking. "Show me everything," I said, letting him drag me toward his collection. We spent the afternoon building block towers and acting out elaborate battles between dragons and knights. Mateo chattered constantly, telling me about his school, his friends, his nonna who lived in Italy and sent him cookies that tasted like sunshine. He asked me about my life with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood, and I found myself editing carefully, turning my lonely existence into something palatable for a child's ears. "Do you have a mommy?" he asked suddenly, and the question hit harder than expected. "No, sweetheart. My mommy died when I was younger." "Me too," he said solemnly. "My mommy went to heaven when I was a baby. Papa doesn't like to talk about her. He gets sad." He leaned against me, careful of my bandages. "But now you're here. Maybe you could be like a mommy, just for a little while." My throat tightened dangerously. "Oh, Mateo, I'm just staying here temporarily. Papa says you're staying as long as you need to," he interrupted with a child's logic. "And I need you to stay forever because you saved me and you're nice and you smell like cookies, even though Agnesi says you haven't been in the kitchen yet, which is weird, but I like it anyway." I hugged him gently, this innocent child trapped in a dangerous world through no fault of his own, and understood with sudden, terrifying clarity why Dante would burn the city down to protect him. Understood, too, why I'd thrown myself onto glass without hesitation. Some souls demanded protection. Mateo was one of them. The question was whether I'd survive being pulled into orbit around the Moretti family's dark sun, or if I'd burn up before I could escape. As Mateo fell asleep against my shoulder, his toy dragon clutched in one hand, I looked out the playroom window at the grounds below. Beautiful, manicured, and patrolled by men with guns hidden beneath expensive suits. A gilded cage was still a cage. But God help me, I wasn't sure I wanted to leave anymore. Night fell over the Moretti estate like a held breath, all tension and waiting. I'd put Mateo to bed an hour ago, reading him 3 stories about brave knights and dragons until his eyes finally closed, his small hand still clutching mine. Agnesi had gently extracted me, assuring me she'd stay with him, her grandmotherly affection for the boy evident in every gesture. Now I stood in my borrowed room, watching through the window as Dante's convoy prepared to leave. Even from a distance, I could pick him out, taller than his men, moving with that fluid confidence that marked predators and kings. He wore all black tonight, and somehow it made him look even more dangerous, a shadow given form and purpose. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up. Our eyes met across the courtyard, across the distance and the darkness, and even through glass and space, I felt the impact of his attention like a physical touch. He raised one hand, not a wave, but an acknowledgement, a promise. I'll come back. Then he was gone, sliding into the back of an armored SUV, and I was left alone with my racing heart and the certainty that tonight could change everything. I tried to distract myself, explored the house, or the parts I was allowed to explore, guided by subtle signs of security cameras and the occasional nod from guards stationed at strategic points. The library called to me, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens lit by subtle ground lights, shelves filled with books in Italian, English, and languages I couldn't identify. I pulled a worn copy of poetry from the shelf, Neruda, the spine cracked from repeated readings, and had just settled into a leather chair when my phone buzzed. My old, cracked phone that somehow had service despite being in what amounted to a fortress, unknown number. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. Hello? Silence. Then breathing, deliberate and heavy. Who is this? My voice came out steadier than I felt. The girl who thinks she's a hero. The voice was male, distorted, mechanical. You should have stayed invisible, little waitress. Now you're a complication. Ice flooded my veins. I don't know what you're talking about. You threw yourself over Dante Moretti's bastard son. Very noble, very stupid. A pause, then. Did he tell you what happens to complications in our world? They disappear, Elena Santos. They cease to exist. And no amount of Moretti protection can save you once you become more trouble than you're worth. The line went dead. I sat frozen, the phone trembling in my hand. Neruda's love poems forgotten. They knew my name. They had my number. They could reach me even here, in Dante's fortress, surrounded by his guards and his promises. I won't let anything happen to you. But how could he prevent something he didn't know about? The door burst open, and I nearly screamed before recognizing Marco, his expression severe. Miss Santos, I need you to come with me. Now. What's wrong? Is Matteo? The boy is fine. We have a situation. Move. His hand went to the gun at his hip, and suddenly the threat wasn't abstract anymore. He led me through corridors I didn't recognize, down stairs that seemed to descend into the earth itself. The lighting changed from elegant to utilitarian, walls becoming concrete and steel. A panic room, I realized. Or something like it. The space he brought me to looked like a command center. Monitors displaying security feeds, communication equipment. 3 more guards already present, weapons visible and ready. Marco positioned me in the center of the room, his body between me and the door. What's happening? I demanded, fear sharpening to anger. Where's Dante? The meeting was an ambush, Marco said grimly, his attention on the monitors, not the Calabrese family, someone using their name to draw the boss out. We've lost contact with the convoy. The world tilted. Lost contact? What does that mean? It means someone is making a play tonight, and they're using you as bait. He finally looked at me, and I saw genuine concern in his scarred features. How did they get your number, Miss Santos? I don't know. I've had the same number for years. It's not... Then I remembered. The call. Someone called me, 10 minutes ago. They knew my name, knew what I did for Matteo. They said I was a complication that needed to disappear. Marco's jaw tightened. Your phone. Give it to me. Now. I handed it over with shaking fingers, watching as he removed the battery with practiced efficiency. They were tracking you. Probably hacked your phone after you gave your information to the hospital, or lifted it from the restaurant's employee records. He turned to one of the other guards. Run a sweep of the house. If they had her phone, they might have more. Minutes stretched into eternities. I watched the security feeds, trying to make sense of the images. Gates, gardens, the long driveway leading to the street. Everything looked peaceful, normal. But I could feel the tension radiating from the men around me. Warriors waiting for battle. Then, on one monitor, movement. A figure appeared at the far edge of the property. Then another. They moved with military precision, keeping to shadows, avoiding camera angles. But not well enough. Marco's security system was state-of-the-art, catching them in infrared and motion detection. South perimeter breach, one guard reported. 4 hostiles, armed, advancing toward the main house. Where's Matteo? My voice came out sharp with panic. Safe room with Agnesi. Reinforced steel, biometric locks. They'd need explosives to get through, and we'd have them dead before they got close. Marco was typing rapidly, speaking into a headset in Italian too fast for me to follow. But they're not going for Matteo. They're coming here. They know where you are. How is that possible? Because someone on the inside told them. Marco's expression went arctic. We have a traitor. The lights cut out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing everything in eerie red. I heard shouting, the crack of gunfire in the distance, and Marco's hand was suddenly on my arm, dragging me toward yet another door. "We're moving you to secondary location. Stay close, stay quiet, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" I nodded, too terrified to speak. The door opened onto a tunnel, actual underground tunnel, and we were running. Marco in front, 2 guards behind, our footsteps echoing off concrete walls. More gunfire above us, closer now, and the acrid smell of smoke beginning to filter through ventilation. "How long until Dante gets here?" I gasped. "He's 10 minutes out. Maybe less if he's breaking every traffic law in the city, which he probably is." Marco pulled me around a corner, and suddenly we were at another door, this one requiring his palm print and retinal scan. But 10 minutes is an eternity in a firefight. The door opened onto a garage filled with vehicles, all black, all armored, all ready to move. Marco pushed me toward an SUV, but before we could reach it, the far entrance exploded inward in a shower of concrete and steel. 3 men emerged from the smoke, weapons raised, and I recognized the cold professionalism of people who killed for living. Marco and his guards returned fire immediately, the enclosed space amplifying the sound, until my ears rang and I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. "Get in the car!" Marco shoved me hard, and I stumbled toward the SUV, my back screaming in protest as I wrenched open the door. A hand caught my arm. Wrong hand, wrong grip. Too rough, too violent. I turned to find a man with dead eyes and a gun pressed to my temple. "Stop shooting or she dies," he called out in accented English. The gunfire ceased instantly. Marco stood frozen, his weapon still raised but useless, his expression murderous. "You don't want to do this. You have no idea what Moretti will do to you if you hurt her." "Moretti is dead, or will be soon," the man said flatly. "And this girl is worth more alive than dead, for now. She's our insurance, our ticket out of this mess." Weren't planning on the Moretti heir having a guardian angel. The gun pressed harder against my skull. "Drop your weapons, all of you, or I paint these walls with her brain." I'd never seen Marco look uncertain before, but now hesitation flickered across his face. He knew his boss, knew what Dante would want him to do. Save the woman at any cost. But he was also a soldier who understood strategy. "Do it," I said quietly. "Marco, drop the guns. Miss Santos, do it." My voice broke. "I'm not dying tonight because of pride. Drop them." Marco's weapon clattered to the ground, followed by the others. The man holding me smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd already won. "Smart girl. Now you're going to walk with me very calmly, and if you try anything heroic like you did with the brat, I'll shoot your kneecaps and drag you. Clear?" I nodded, and he began pulling me backward toward the destroyed entrance. I caught Marco's eyes one last time, saw the promise there. "We'll find you." And then I was being dragged into the smoke and darkness. Outside, a van waited, engine running. 2 more men inside, and I was thrown into the back like cargo, my head cracking against the floor hard enough to see stars. The door slammed shut, the van lurched into motion, and through the ringing in my ears I heard the first man speaking into a phone. "We have the girl. Moretti's new pet. Tell the boss we're bringing her to the warehouse." A pause. "Yes, the one by the docks, where we were supposed to meet him tonight." A cold laugh. "Let's see how much his son's savior is really worth to him." I lay on the cold metal floor, my back on fire, my head throbbing, and understood with terrible clarity what Dante had meant about debts. He owed me for saving Matteo. But now I'd cost him something too. Leverage, weakness, a vulnerability his enemies could exploit. The question was whether he'd consider me worth saving, or whether I'd just become another complication that needed to disappear. The van took a sharp corner, and I rolled into the wall, pain exploding through my barely healed wounds. But I didn't cry out, didn't give them the satisfaction. If I was going to die tonight, it wouldn't be as a victim. It would be as the woman who'd thrown herself onto glass for a child she didn't know. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to mean something in this dark world I'd stumbled into, even if no one ever knew my name again. The warehouse stank of oil and salt water. Years of maritime commerce soaked into concrete that had witnessed deals made and broken, lives traded like currency. They'd tied me to a chair in the center of the vast space, professional knots, tight enough to bite but not cut circulation, and left me under the watch of a single guard, while the others prepared for Dante's arrival. Because he would come. We all knew it. The question was whether he'd come to save me or to clean up a mess. "You're very calm," the guard observed, smoking a cigarette near a rust-stained pillar. He was younger than the others, maybe mid-20s, with a scar bisecting his eyebrow. "Most people in your position would be crying, begging, pissing themselves." "Would it help?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He considered this. "No, but it would be more entertaining. Sorry to disappoint." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You really jumped on broken glass for the Moretti kid? That wasn't just propaganda. It wasn't propaganda. It was instinct." I shifted slightly, testing the ropes, and pain lanced through my back. The rough handling had torn some of my stitches. I could feel the warmth of fresh blood soaking into my borrowed sweater. "He's 5 years old. He shouldn't have to pay for his father's sins." "None of us should," the guard said quietly, something haunted flickering in his eyes. "But we do anyway. That's how this world works." He took a long drag. "For what it's worth, I told them this was a mistake. Moretti doesn't negotiate when it comes to his son or anyone connected to him. He'll come in here like the wrath of God, and we'll all pay the price." "Then why stay?" "Because I'm already dead. We all are. The moment we signed up for this war." He crushed the cigarette beneath his heel. "But maybe you're not. Maybe if you're smart, you'll tell Moretti everything you've seen here. Give him names, faces, details. Might be the only thing that keeps you breathing past tonight." Before I could respond, the main entrance burst open. Not the subtle breach of professionals. This was the entrance of someone who wanted his arrival known, feared, felt. Dante Moretti walked into the warehouse, surrounded by a dozen armed men, and even from across the vast space, I could feel the fury radiating from him like heat from a furnace. His suit was torn at the shoulder. Blood, his or someone else's, spattered across his shirt. But he moved with predatory purpose, each step deliberate, controlled, lethal. His eyes found me immediately, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Not relief, not yet. But recognition, possession. "Mine," that look said. "And you've taken what's mine." The man who'd held the gun to my head, their leader, I'd gathered, stepped forward from the shadows, older, graying, with the weathered confidence of someone who'd survived decades in this business. "Moretti, glad you could join us. Russo." Dante's voice could have frozen blood. "You have 30 seconds to release her before I burn everything you love to the ground." Still so dramatic. "Your father would be disappointed." Russo smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The girl is unharmed, mostly. Though I understand my men were a bit rough during extraction, my apologies. 20 seconds. Let's talk like civilized men, Dante. You have something I want. Information about the Calabrese family's operations in the Port District. You give me that, I give you the girl." Everyone walks away. 15 seconds. Dante hadn't moved, hadn't drawn a weapon, but every man in his contingent had hands on guns, ready, and you're counting your life in those seconds, Russo. Choose wisely how you spend them. You're bluffing. You won't risk her life. The shot rang out before anyone could blink, and the guard who'd been smoking, the young one with the scarred eyebrow, dropped, a perfect hole in his forehead. He'd been reaching for his weapon, telegraphing his move a split second too soon. Dante hadn't even looked at him. His eyes remained locked on Russo, gun now visible in his hand, barrel still smoking slightly in the cold air. 10 seconds. And that wasn't a warning shot. That was a demonstration. The next one goes through your skull unless Elena is released. Immediately. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Russo's men drew weapons. Dante's men responded in kind. And suddenly, I was in the center of a Mexican standoff with enough firepower to level the building. The ropes cut into my wrists as I instinctively tried to protect myself, to make myself smaller. But there was nowhere to hide. "You're insane." Russo backed toward me, using my chair as a shield. You'll kill her yourself in the crossfire. I'm a very good shot. Are you? Dante's smile was a terrible thing, all teeth and promised violence. Because from where I'm standing, you're using a woman who saved my son as a bargaining chip, which means you've already signed your death warrant. The question is, how many of your men die with you? Boss! One of Russo's men started, fear evident in his voice. Maybe we should... Shut up! Russo pressed his gun against my temple, mirror of the scene in the garage, and I felt the cold metal kiss my skin with terrible intimacy. Everyone stands down, or I blow her brains out right now. Time seemed to crystallize, each second stretching into infinity. I could see Dante's jaw tighten, could see the calculations running behind his eyes. Angles, trajectories, acceptable losses. Could see the moment he decided what I was worth to him. Everything, his expression said. You're worth everything. You're not going to shoot her, Dante said, his voice dropping to something almost conversational. Because the moment you do, there's no negotiation, no mercy, no quick death. I'll keep you alive for days, Russo. Weeks, if I'm creative. I'll make you watch as I dismantle everything you've built, everyone you love. Your daughter in Milan, Sophia, isn't it? Studying architecture? I'll send her your screams recorded on a loop. Your mother in the nursing home in Naples? I'll make sure her final days are spent knowing her son died begging for death I wouldn't grant. You're bluffing. Am I? Dante took a step forward, and his men moved with him, a coordinated advance that spoke to years of training, loyalty, absolute trust. You've been in this business long enough to know my reputation, to know that I don't make empty threats, that when I promise suffering, I deliver it with interest. So ask yourself, is the information you want worth more than everything you hold dear? I watched Russo's hand tremble slightly against my temple, watched uncertainty crack his facade. He'd miscalculated, thought Dante would value information over a woman he'd known for barely 2 days. Didn't understand that to men like Dante Moretti, some debts transcended logic, strategy, business. Some debts were written in blood and glass, and the screams of a child almost harmed. Stand down, Russo said finally, his voice defeated. All of you, weapons down. His men hesitated, but ultimately complied. The warehouse filled with the clatter of guns being lowered, though not released. No one was that trusting. Russo removed the gun from my head, stepped back, hands raised. She's yours. Take her. The information wasn't worth this. Dante crossed the space between us in seconds. And then he was there, kneeling before me, his hands working the ropes with surprising gentleness, given the violence that had just radiated from him. Are you hurt? His voice was rough, intimate, meant only for me. My back, some stitches tore. But I'm okay. Dante, they said. I know what they said. The ropes fell away, and he helped me stand, his arm immediately supporting my weight when my legs threatened to buckle. I know everything, Elena, and they'll pay for every moment of fear they caused you. He turned back to Russo, and I felt the shift in him, from the man who'd gently freed me to the monster who ruled through fear. Marco, take Miss Santos to the car. Get Dr. Russo to meet us at the house. No. The word escaped before I could stop it, and Dante's eyes snapped back to me. I want to see this. Whatever happens next, I want to see who you really are. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. Elena, you don't need to. Yes, I do. I straightened despite the pain, despite the blood soaking through my sweater, despite every instinct screaming to run. You said I'm part of this world now, that I matter. Then let me see what that means. All of it. No sanitized version, no protection from the truth. Dante studied me for a long moment, and I saw him weighing options, calculating costs. Finally, he nodded. Stay behind me, no matter what happens. He turned back to Russo, and his voice carried across the warehouse with absolute authority. You touched what's mine, threatened what I protect. In any other circumstance, that would mean your death. Slow, painful, educational for anyone else considering similar actions. Russo's face went gray. Moretti, please, but... Dante raised a hand, silencing him. You also had the intelligence to recognize when you'd lost, to back down before forcing my hand. And that, barely, earns you a reprieve. You'll leave the city. Tonight. Everything you own here, you forfeit. Every contact, every deal, every penny of profit, mine now. Your family remains untouched, but only because you released Elena unharmed. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something that promised worse than death. If I ever see you again, Russo, if you ever return to my city, if you ever even speak my name, I'll forget this mercy, and I'll spend months reminding you why mercy from a Moretti is worth more than gold. Understood? Understood, Russo whispered, broken. Then get out of my sight. Russo and his remaining men fled, scrambling for exits like rats from a sinking ship. Within minutes, the warehouse was empty except for Dante, his men, and me. The silence felt deafening after so much violence threatened. Dante turned back to me, and I saw exhaustion in his eyes now. The adrenaline fading to reveal a man who'd aged years in a single night. You should have let Marco take you to the car, he said quietly. Probably. I swayed slightly, and he was there immediately, catching me. But I needed to see, to understand what I've become part of. And do you understand? His arms wrapped around me carefully, mindful of my wounds, and I let myself lean into his strength because standing had become too difficult. I understand that you're a man who keeps his promises, that you value loyalty above everything, that you'd burn the world for your son. I looked up at him, this beautiful, dangerous man who'd somehow become my anchor in 2 days, and that you consider me worth protecting, even though I don't understand why, because you jumped, he said simply, his hand coming up to cup my face, because when faced with a choice between your safety and a child's, you didn't hesitate. Because in a world full of people who calculate every move, you led with your heart. How could I not protect someone capable of that kind of selfless courage? I'm not brave, I whispered. I'm terrified. Of you, of this world, of what it means that I don't want to leave anymore. Brave and terrified aren't mutually exclusive, Elena. Often they're the same thing. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I saw something in his eyes I didn't dare name. You can still leave. I'll set you up somewhere safe, new identity, enough money to start over. You don't have to stay in this darkness. The offer was genuine. I could hear it in his voice. He'd let me go if I asked, but the thought of leaving, of returning to invisibility, to a life where I didn't matter, felt like suffocation. What if I want to stay? I heard myself ask. Not because I'm trapped or afraid, but because for the first time in my life, I feel like I matter. Like I'm more than just furniture people look through. What if I want this, want me? He finished, and there was hope in his voice, raw and unexpected. Because I want you, Elena. I've wanted you from the moment you threw yourself onto that glass. You've become essential to me in ways I can't explain, don't want to examine too closely. But I need you to be sure. This world, my world, it's not kind. It will test you, break you if you let it. And once you're truly in, there's no going back. I thought of my studio apartment, cold and lonely. Of shifts at Aurelio's where no one knew my name. Of a life measured in tips and rent payments and slow, grinding invisibility. Then I thought of Matteo's small hand in mine, his innocent joy. Of Dante's fierce protection, the way he looked at me like I hung the moon. Of feeling valued, seen, necessary. I'm sure, I said, and knew I meant it. I choose this. I choose you. Dante's expression transformed. Relief and possession, and something deeper flooding his features. Then you're mine, Elena Santos, completely, and I take care of what's mine. He kissed me then, there in the warehouse surrounded by his men and the echoes of violence. And it tasted like promises written in blood and glass. Tasted like a future I'd never imagined wanting, but now couldn't live without. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. Let's go home. Home. Not his house, but home. As if I'd always belonged there, in his fortress, in his life, in his dangerous and complicated world. And maybe I had. Maybe from the moment I'd seen a child in danger, my fate had been sealed. Maybe some people were destined to crash into each other's orbits, pulled by gravity neither could resist. As Dante helped me to the car, his arm secure around my waist, I looked back at the warehouse one last time. This was where Elena Santos, the invisible waitress, had died, and where someone new, someone who mattered, who belonged, who'd been claimed by a man powerful enough to reshape the world, had been born. The transformation had cost me blood and fear, and every shred of the safety I'd once clung to. But as Dante settled me into the car, his hand finding mine with possessive tenderness, I knew I'd pay that price again. Some cages were worth choosing, some monsters were worth loving. And some debts, the ones written in courage and blood and the fierce protection of innocence, could never be fully repaid. They could only be honored, forever. 3 months later, I stood in Dante's study, our study now, he'd insisted, watching snow fall over the estate's gardens through floor-to-ceiling windows. The scars on my back had faded to silver lines, badges of honor I'd learned to wear with pride rather than shame. Matteo's laughter echoed from somewhere in the house, probably the kitchen where Agnese was teaching him to make cookies like nonnas. He called me Elena Mama now, and every time he did, my heart threatened to burst. Arms wrapped around me from behind, careful as always of my scars, and Dante's chin rested on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about? How different my life is now." I leaned back into his warmth, into the safety and danger he represented in equal measure. How I thought I wanted invisibility. But what I really wanted was to be seen by the right person. And am I the right person? His voice held amusement, but I heard the genuine question beneath. I turned in his arms, meeting those dark eyes that had haunted my dreams and waking hours since that first night. "You're the only person, Dante, the one I threw myself into danger for. The one who caught me when I fell, always," he promised, and sealed it with a kiss that tasted like forever. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. But inside Dante's fortress, inside the home we'd built from blood and courage and a love neither of us had expected, everything burned warm and bright. I'd jumped onto glass to save a child, and in doing so, I'd saved myself. Some stories end in tragedy, some in triumph. Ours ended in both, and neither, and everything in between. A tapestry woven from darkness and light, violence and tenderness, fear and love so fierce it could weather any storm, and I wouldn't change a single scar,